We are going to demystify layers, and you will discover just how much power they give you when you're creating your amazing artwork. The GIMP layers are a stack of slides. Every layer contains a part of the image. Using layers, we can construct an image using all different parts. We can apply edits to each individual layer that won't affect any of the other layers in the document. The layers at the top of the list are the ones that appear closest to you or in front. And as we go down the list, the ones that are lower are further back or behind the one above it. When you play with this file, you can experiment with what layers do. Right now, the pickup is in front of the woodshed. Now the woodshed is in front of the pickup. You see I moved the woodshed above the pickup in the layer. I'll return it back. Behind, there is an aspen tree. It's down here. I can move the aspen tree in front of the woodshed. That's how the stacking order in layers work. We can also have a layer visible or invisible. Right now, I've just turned the truck on and off. The woodshed is on and off. That's what these eyeball icons show you. If you see the eyeball, the layer is turned on. These icons up here enable you to lock your specific layer. When I hit the paintbrush, you can see here I'm selected on my truck icon. No brush tool will work on that layer. If I unlock it, you can see that I can paint on it. These are just for paintbrush tools in general. I'm going to undo that. This cross prevents the layer from being moved. Right now it is unselected, and I can move the layer around. When I have it selected, that layer is not going to move. This checkerboard icon locks the alpha channels. That is for more advanced work in GIMP, and we don't need it for making images with the flashcard library. Right over here, we can change the opacity of a layer. By sliding it to the left or to the right, we can change how see-through it is. Here, we can link layers. So if you see I select the truck on its own, it's going to move. Now if I link it to the woodshed moves with it. At the bottom of your layers panel, there are a variety of functions. This one on the left is to create a new layer. When we click on it, a dialog box opens up and gives us the option to label it, pick a color tag, and let us know its opacity, and whether or not we want to lock it. There are other features, but for now, this is all we need to know. We can also group layers. With this folder down here, I can create a new layer group. I am going to name it Tools. And I can place all these images in it, so they're all together. And now I can rearrange them in the folder here. And now when I move them, they all move together because they're in the same folder. Down at the bottom here we have these two arrow keys. They are for raising and lowering a layer. So I have the pickup truck here. If I click down, it's going behind everything. It's behind the woodshed, it's behind the aspen. If I click it back up again, it heads to the front. Next to it is the duplicate layer button. So right now I have the pickup truck selected. If I hit duplicate layer, we'll see that it has pickup truck blue PNG copy. And if I hit it again, it has copy number 1. Now when I move it, you can see that there's a duplicate layer there. Let's undo those extra layers with Command Z or Control Z. Now the next function is merge layer down. So we can look again here. I have the blue pickup truck as a layer selected. Now, if I hit this merge layer down button, it will be merged with the woodshed. Now they are a complete layer. So if you find something that you want to merge together and you make it permanent, this is the function that you pick. Now, this next function is an alpha channel function, and we don't need to know that right now because that gets into advanced options into GIMP. But this final one is the delete layer. So anything that is selected, that you click this X, it disappears. We hit undo again, boop, boop, boop. And finally, one more part to show you is that at the top here, you have these three tabs between layers, channels, and paths. And so when we do paths later, you'll be looking to go to this tab to turn your paths on and off as you need them when we're making that. So for now, this is the layers overview. There are a few more advanced options that I like to show you, but for now, just for you to understand the basics and get comfortable with working at it is good enough. And as we use it more and more, you're going to get stronger and stronger with using layers. Working with the Move tool. When you're creating your images in GIMP, one of the tools you're going to use a lot is the Move tool. Now we find the Move tool over here in the toolbox here, or keyboard shortcut M. And what the Move tool will move is layers, selections, paths, or guides, and even your text boxes. So you can see I am moving this kindling layer around. I can move the woodshed around. The Move tool has little settings here in the dialog box. I can have it set for selection, for path, or to pick a layer or guide directly. So for example, if I click on the kindling right here, it'll move the kindling. If I click on the truck, it'll move the truck. When I have it set on active layer, it will only move the layer that I have selected. Now once it's selected, I can also move the item on the page with the arrow keys. So I can, with the arrow keys, it makes slight little movements, but with shift and arrow, it goes bigger steps. So that's great for when you're arranging things in your image. Also, if you create a selection, GIMP will move the selection. I go back to the Move tool here and click on selection, and now GIMP moves the selection. I was going to deselect that, and if I make a path, I can move the path. I'm going to go to the path here, make it visible, and then select my Move tool. I can move, and select on path, I can move the path. So it's a really powerful tool. Always just make sure you check what's happening in your tool dialog box here with GIMP. Working with the Unified Transform tool. The Unified Transform tool is probably one of my most favorite tools inside of GIMP. This tool combines several tools: rotate, scale, shear, and perspective, performing one or several of these actions at once in one single operation. We can also combine two or more options to give you almost infinite possibilities of transformation of your layer. We find the Unified Transform tool here in the toolbox or hotkey command Shift-T. When we click on the layer, we can see all of these boxes around it, and each of these has a special function. The diamonds are for shearing. The squares are for scaling, which makes it bigger or smaller. And the small diamonds adjust the perspective. Also, we can rotate when we touch on the outside of the tool. Inside the middle, there is a pivot point, which we can adjust, and the object will rotate around the pivot point. So wherever you stick that, that is where your object's going to rotate around. When you're happy with your transformation, we have to hit transform. I'm going to undo everything. Also, if you've done a transformation and you're not happy with it, you can reset it. You'll notice while the tool is activated, the layer seems to come to the front of the image. It'll go back in its proper space once you've hit the transform button. And remember to check with your tool options dialog box here to make sure that you're on a layer, a selection, or a path. There are a number of other settings in here that you can experiment with and have a lot of fun with the Unified Transform tool. Working with the Cage tool. The Cage tool is a special transforming tool allowing you to select the transforming area by setting anchor points by freehand drawing, similar to the way you do with the free selection tool. With the Cage tool, you can do some wild transformations. Now these won't take effect until you hit enter. All right, I'm going to walk you through on how to use this. Now, here's a good practice to have when you're using any kind of graphical software. Let's take and make a copy of the pickup truck. So we're going to go down here, we're going to hit duplicate layer, and let's turn off the rest of these so we can focus on what we're doing right now. Move tool. So I'm going to go back and go to the move tool. Move this up the middle here. Now what you'll notice is that the bounding box around this layer is really tight. So we're going actually to right click on this copy and we're going to set the layer boundary size to image size, because that'll give us more room in which to work with the Cage Transform tool. So we select the Cage Transform tool over here or Shift G, and all we do is we start clicking points with our mouse all around the image. So the more points you put, the more transform points you have. And we always check the tool option box, and you can play with those settings there. Now I'm going to grab a point, I'm going to pull it and see what happens. I'm going to grab this point and pull it and see what happens. I like that inflated look of this truck. Right here, oops. I say oops a lot when I'm doing this stuff, but then I'm learning at the same time. We're going to pull this out here. Now it's looking like really cartoon. I mean, it was a cartoon before, but now it's really cartoony. All right, that's good for now. I'm going to hit enter, and now the layer is transformed. That is really all there is to know about this tool. Have some fun, play with it, and remember to duplicate your layer first. Using GIMP's crop tool. The crop tool allows you to change the size of a layer or your entire document manually by creating a selection. We find it up here in the toolbox or hotkey command Shift C. Let's say you've created an image and now you want to use only a section of it for storytelling. So we have this whole truck scene here, the firewood scene for layers. But let's say we're going to having a close-up, maybe making a comic. I can go right in here, hit enter, and now I have a scene that shows a specific region that I want to have for my image. I'm just going to undo this. It's important to watch your settings. I'm going to select current layer only. We see here that I have my background folder selected. I'm going to go and I'm going to crop this region out. I'm going to adjust it, hit return, and now we see, if I use the move tool, that whole background has been cropped. I'm going to select a different layer. Let's just do the very background layer. And we see that it too has been cropped. We can see the sky has been cropped and this has been cropped. I'm going to undo all this. When I have current layer only deselected, the whole image is going to get cropped. I'm going to go right here, bring my selection around, hit enter. But if I click on any one of these layers, they are available. It's just the whole parameters of my image itself have changed. So all the layers are intact, but what I can see here in my canvas is different. So it might be very handy for resizing when you're creating an image. Just going to undo all this again. And one final checkbox here to see is allow growing. So if I were to crop this, and I've committed to it, and I'm not really happy with it, I could go back over again and recrop it, and the information is available underneath. This should get you started with the crop tool and get you comfortable to start cropping your own images. So once again, have fun with it, experiment, and we'll see you in the next lesson. The free select tool. The free selection tool or lasso tool allows us to make a rough selection. We find it in the toolbox here or hotkey Command F. Simply click, hold, and draw your selection. When you come up to the yellow dot, then you hit enter to confirm your selection. Now let's move it down to the truck. We are on the truck layer right now, selected on the truck layer right now. I'm going to go to the move tool, Command M. I'm going to make sure that I am on selection. Let's bring it down to the truck here. We're going to copy this section right here. I'm going to right click, edit, copy, edit, paste. I'm going to actually just make this a new layer, so it's a little simpler. I go back to my move tool and click on layer, and now you see what we've copied. So it's really, really simple. Now I'm just going to undo all this, like Command Z or Control Z in Windows. You can still see that my selection is active here. When we go up to the Tool Options menu, we can see that there are 4 functions here. The first one overrides selection. This is by default. So if I make a new selection, the old one will disappear. So if I start selecting and end up here, my previous selection has disappeared. Now if I click on this, add to the selection, and I make a new selection, click on it. Now you can see my selection, they have merged. They've doubled in size. And if you look on the right here, this tab up here is the selection tab. It gives you a black and white view of what your selection looks like. There are several tabs here that you can experiment with, but this one right here is the selection tab. Now, this next one is subtract. So if I go and I make another selection and I hit enter, now you can see in the selection dialog that my selection is different, but the black and white image. Now I'm going to copy and paste this selection into a new layer. I'm going to go to my move tool and I'm going to move the layer, making sure that layer is selected. And you can see that GIMP has copied exactly what was in my selection. So I'm going to go Command Z and undo again. And I'm going to undo this entire selection. Shift Command A. Now the final function is intersect. To do that, we have to start first with the original selection. I'm going to make a selection here like this and commit it. Then I click on the intersection. Now let's make a funky selection here. How's that going to look? So I've crossed through it. And now what's left, is the intersection of those two selections. I'm going to paste it so that we can see, and I'm going to go to my move tool. So there you have it. That is the lasso tool and the free selection tool and the lasso tool. These four functions here are in all the selection tools. Have fun experimenting with it. Using the Select by Color tool. Another interesting tool for selections is the Select by Color tool, and it's right here. It's got 3 dots on it, or it's Shift O. Now what that does effectively is every place you click on, it selects the color. I'm just going to deselect, and we'll begin. This Wolf and Sky one, I'm going to go down here and make a duplicate layer. I'm going to turn off this one, because when we're working, making a duplicate layer is always the smart way to go. This way, if you get too far into something and make a mistake, you're not left having to start all over again. So I'm going to start clicking here with the Select by Color tool. And as I select, I'm going to hit the Shift key and make my selection bigger and bigger for the sky. And all these spots in here that I see marching ants, I'm going to select all those out too until they're all gone. The last couple spots where there's some blue, I can get a little bit tighter. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm going to go Command or Control X. I can delete the area that's been selected. Now I can deselect by Shift Command A, Shift Control A. And we're left with this wolf on the ground cut away from the background. It's not perfect, and when I turn off the white background, you can see that there are a couple spots that I missed, but it's still a pretty interesting way of extracting an image if you have a good solid color background. Where I think this may be helpful is for some of you who like to draw and may not have access to a tablet, but you do have a sketchbook. We could take your black and white sketches and make it into something that you could paint. So I'm going to open as layers, and I'm going to go into, I'm going to find a document that I have. You may have a sketch somewhere that you could use. I have a black and white version from the Nia morning routines work that I drew earlier, and I'm going to open here the alarm. I'm going to right click, new from visible, and I'm going to drag this to the top. I'm going to turn all these off except for my background layer. While I have visible selected, I've got my Select by Color tool, and I'm going to click on the white. Then I'm going to right click, Edit, Cut, or Command X on Mac or Control X on Windows. Shift Command A or Shift Control A to deselect, or right click, select, None. If I turn off the background layer, we now see we have an ink layer on top of a transparency. This white is where I accidentally put white on the wrong layer when I originally drew this picture. I can now make a new layer down here, and I'm just going to call it Paint. And I'm going to make the fill with transparency. Oops, let me bring it a little higher. And then hit OK. And I'm going to move it underneath my ink layer. I can take my paintbrush and go and open my Brushes tab. Grab my brush. I have a blue color selected, and I'm going to start painting. My brush seems a little bit small, so I'm going to go and make it just a little bit bigger. I can see that it's acting a bit weird, and oh, my spacing is too far apart. Let's make that smaller. Oh, there we go. Look at that. Always check your settings. Now I'm painting beneath my ink layer. Let's do a different color, maybe a little bit of a flesh tone. I can play with the sliders a little bit. This looks pretty close. And I can paint in here. You can add layers for highlights and shadows as well. So I think this is a fun way to bring your own sketches into GIMP, and perhaps you will add to the library as well. Have fun, keep experimenting, and we'll see you in the next lesson. Let's have some fun with the Foreground Select tool. All right, for the Foreground Select tool, I think we need a higher res image than we used on the Scissor Select tool. So I'm going to create a new document. Let's make it a US letter again. I want it to be portrait because I found a really cool picture on Google right over here. I did just a wolf as the search terms, and then let's click on that. The resolution on that's really high. I'm going to right click, copy image, and go over here to GIMP, edit, paste, bloop. Look at that. Okay, that's pretty cool. I think we can leave it the way it is right now. And now we're going to go over to our Foreground Select tool, which is right here. Click on that. One thing I neglected to do was to commit this to a new layer. So I right click on it to new layer, and I double click to label it. Call it wolf face. And we always remember to label our layers because it'll save you so much trouble later. And also to check for a transparency, which it already has, alpha channel to it, and we're good. All right, let's get into this. This is a two-step process. The first step, we just automatically, it has the free selection tool showing, and we make an outline around the part we want to extract. I'm just going to draw a line with my mouse around here, and I hit enter to create the selection. The second step will be painting out the inside of this wolf head. So you can see that there is contrast between the edge of the wolf, the hair, and everything like that. We are going to now paint with this next brush. It just automatically pops up. And if you'll notice that the color of this is matching what my color is here. So it's a good idea to set your color ahead of time before you start this process. And I'm just going to paint just along the inside edge of the wolf itself. I'm just going to go right here. Just take it in easy steps because this is a very CPU intensive process. To make painting faster, I'm going to go and make my stroke width wider and continue on with the inside of the wolf. This is a really cool tool, and I love using it because there are a lot of free images on the internet, and sometimes it's just really helpful to find something that's available and take parts that I need for my projects. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm going to hit select. Now we have this really cool selection. Up here we see that there is a little bit of over selection here, but I think this is easy to fix in the next step. Now we're going to go right click, edit, copy, edit, paste, and then I'm going to go over to my layers menu, right click, and go to new layer. Let's see how this looks. I'm going to turn off the layer beneath. Good selection. You know, there is some fuzziness in here where the hair, where it met, but that's a pretty good selection to pull out of a photograph, I think. I think the fastest way to clean this part up in here is with the eraser tool. So let's do that right now. I'm going to go to my brushes here and brush tab, and let's find something soft and fuzzy. Here, this looks pretty soft and fuzzy. Let's pull that apart here. I'm doing my mouse and just taking this away, this little bit right here. And that's pretty cool. Oh, and I see my eraser opacity must not be set fully high as it can be. Yeah, the opacity's halfway. Let's crank it up a little bit more. And there we are. There we go. We got a better selection here. I like that. Let's double click on this, and I'm just going to call this wolf head extracted. You can call it whatever you want. That's just for now. And even see it's on a transparency. So now we could take that, if we take the move tool, or let's take the transform tool, and we can make this smaller. We can even do all kinds of things with it because now it's floating free. We have an asset that we can work with. So have some fun with this tool for sure. It's really, really cool. And we will see you in the next lesson. Working with the rectangle and ellipse select tool. I've combined the rectangle and ellipse selection tools because they are really very similar in how they operate. The rectangle selection tool is designed to select rectangular regions of the active layer. The ellipse selection tool is designed to select circular and elliptical regions from an image. Let's go to my layers lesson here. We're going to do something different today. I'm going to put all the layers on, and there is a really interesting function inside of GIMP where we can create new from visible. Now at the very top, I'm going to turn all these bottom layers off. We have this one flattened image of all the visible layers, and this will be very helpful when we're doing our lesson in the rectangular selection tool and ellipse selection tool. To access the rectangle selection tool, we find it here in the toolbox or hotkey command R. When you activate the rectangle select tool or ellipse select tool, it's important you check with your tool dialog box. There are a number of really interesting settings here, and it'll be a lot of fun when you start to play with them. Just like in the free select tool, you have the option to overwrite, add, select, and intersect your selections. There are some other settings here which I will demonstrate as well. To make a selection, you simply click and drag, and there's your selection. Now you notice there are these boxes inside. They allow you to adjust what your selection looks like. When you're happy with your selection, I'm going to move it down a little bit here. If I grab in the middle, I can move it. Let's put it here. Edit, copy, edit, paste. Let's make a new layer. And to show that it's there, I'm going to turn off the layer underneath. I'm going to undo what I've done. Command Z in Mac, Control C in Windows. All right, and to deselect the rectangle, Shift Command A or Shift Control A. I'm going to demonstrate quickly using all four of these functions to create a very interesting selection. So we're going to start with the overwrite. There we are. I'm hitting enter. I'm going to add to it. Enter. And I'm going to subtract from it. Enter. And then I'm going to intersect as well. Let's do an intersection. So let's do a intersection. Enter. I'm going to edit, copy, edit, paste, commit this to a new layer. Let's turn our layer off, and there we have it. Let's undo all this. Okay, now another cool feature when you're doing your rectangle select tool. Let me get it on the right part here. Once again, watch your tool options dialog. I can have rounded corners, and by playing with this slider, if you're looking at on the right hand side, you can change how your selection looks, but it's more rounded or less rounded. So we could take it and make it very interesting shapes. So that's very, very cool thing to play with. Also, feathered edges. Let's take this selection here. We're going to feather the edges. You can see here it looks kind of ghosty up here. I'll show you how that looks. Edit, copy, edit, paste, commit to a new layer, and you'll see that it has a nice kind of soft edge around it. So for some of the things you're going to be creating, the soft edges feel very nice. So definitely play with that as well. Let's undo this. Get back to where we were. Shift Command A to deselect. Now let's play with the ellipses. Just like with the rectangle tool, there are functions here, the same as before, and you simply drag your selection to create the ellipse. You hit enter to confirm it. I'm going to undo it. There are some helpful features inside the tool dialog box. For example, if you want a fixed circle that's perfect, you can select that. Hit enter, then you have a perfect circle and it's not going to warp around on you. And even should you want to adjust it, it will stay that way so long as fixed is selected. If you unselect it, then it gets all wild. All right, that's selection tools for you. Have fun creating them, and we'll see you in the next lesson.